Greetings, Otaku Faithful. Thank you for joining me again this week. Once again, it's Larry Williams, OAW Commander-in-Chief, and I'm here to bring you all a special rant segment video right here on Otaku Assemble! Weekly, as always, I'm here to bring you the latest in this week's video, and man, when was the last time I did a rant segment video? I'm not talking about a mid-review rant. I'm talking about a video specifically and especially dedicated to a rant. It's been a while. But I decided to go ahead and knock out this vid. This is actually a topic I've been wanting to talk about for the last couple of months, matter of fact. And so I figured now was as good as time as any. However, instead of this being more of a traditional rant, instead this might segue somewhat in between a rant segment and a discussion video, because I really want to talk about the topic, not just get on camera and be like, oh, you know, I don't like this or I don't like that, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that. I don't want this video to come across in that manner. So with that being said, this is going to be my official problems with fanboys, and I'm starting to notice now that more of my rants are kind of falling under that banner of my problems with insert rant topic here. But here's the thing, I don't want anyone to watch this video and automatically assume or just automatically jump to the idea that, oh well, Larry's bashing me, man, this, oh man, he's talking about me, man, this is targeted towards me, man. No, that's not the intent of this video. That's not my goal in this discussion. What I'm hoping for is that anyone who watches this video, if your behaviors, if your mentality falls anywhere in line with some of the things I'm frowning upon in this video, that hopefully you'll stop, think about it, and reconsider. You'll say something along the lines of, huh, I do that. Well, maybe I should think about it next time I do it, or maybe I shouldn't be so quick to do that, or maybe I shouldn't do that, or maybe I can improve on that. That's what I'm hoping for. This video is not targeted at anyone specifically, and as I said, my intention and my goal with this video is to hopefully inform and enlighten you all to some habits, some actions, some mindsets, some mentalities that you may have in regards to certain fandoms, and pretty much in regards to how people react within fandoms in general, and hopefully you'll reconsider some of those things. So now, my problems with fanboys, this pretty much stems with my experiences with certain fandoms, my observations of how people behave in regards to certain fandoms, but also personal history, because I will be the first to admit I am a recovering fanboy. I am a recovering fanboy from certain fandoms, as number one, the New England Patriots, because I committed many fanboy monstrosities as a New England Patriot fan. I'm a recovering Sony fanboy. I'm also a recovering Naruto fanboy, and I've kind of completely kicked that in the bucket because I've completely dropped that series over a year ago. But the thing is, in regards to fandoms and fanboys in general, I'm starting to see some of the same things that I used to do. And so now that I'm at a position where I've acknowledged those things and I've realized those things in myself, now hopefully I can enlighten others and hopefully educate others in some of these things that perhaps we shouldn't do. And hopefully you all will benefit from that as well. So first and foremost, we have to understand, in order to fully understand the context of this video, you have to understand the context of my argument. What do I define a fanboy as? Keep in mind, I do not define a fanboy by any one any one established definition of the term. What I mean is this: my definition is based off of my own personal experiences, my own personal observations. And so if my definition falls in line with any other that's been previously made, that's all just coincidence. But I'm not going off of anyone else's definition but my own. My definition of a fanboy is anyone who partakes in a fandom but obsesses about said fandom to the point of irrational behavior and who acts in an unreasonable manner. That is my definition. Once again, anybody who partakes in a fandom and behaves and thinks about said fandom in a way that is irrational, or their obsession ascends the point of reason. That, in my personal opinion, is a fanboy. Now, why are fanboys an issue? Why do I have a problem with fanboys? Well, fanboys oftentimes, they have an elitist mentality and demeanor about them. They think that because they either have acquired knowledge, or because they have acquired the products, or because they have been in the fandom for an extended period of time, they automatically assume and they automatically believe themselves to be higher than anyone else in the fandom. That is an elitist mentality. And once again, as I said, I am not above this. Hell, as I say these words, I still think like that in regards to certain fandoms that I am in. But when it gets to the point where these fanboys take that mentality, that thought, because keep in mind, if you keep this to yourself, then there is no harm done. I mean, if you think this about yourself, and if you keep this inside your head, then there is no harm done, because you are not taking this mentality and expelling it upon others. So at that point, in my opinion, I don't think there's no harm being done. The problem comes into play when you take that idea and you start exerting it on others. When you start alienating people within the fandom as, oh, you are not a real fan. That's number one. That is the attack that happens within the fandom. But also when it gets to the point where you alienate others from entering the fandom, that is when it becomes a problem, because you are hindering the experience of other people in the fandom. You are tarnishing their experience because you deem them non-worthy to be within your fandom. But number two, you do so to people trying to get into the fandom because you view them as outsiders and you think they have no place within your fandom. When that starts to happen, that's when it becomes a problem. So once again, I've done this. I have done this. I've committed this atrocity. I said monstrosity earlier, didn't I? It's an atrocity. Excuse me. I'm kind of trying to get all my thoughts in one basket. But I've committed this before. So seeing it within myself, I'm hoping that I could potentially prevent others from doing the same. And you do that through educating others and informing others about this. So that is a problem. Another problem with fanboys is, like I said, the point in which your obsession becomes illogical, becomes irrational, becomes beyond reason. I've always made the comment, and I've actually used this as a counter argument to gauge fans from fanboys and those who are more faithful to a fandom and those who are not, which is also part of the problem. But I've made the claim that if you cannot critique something that you are a fan of, then you are at that point, you are no longer just being a fan. You are trading more along the lines of what I defined as fanboyism, where you can't, you are so obsessed and so wrapped up in whatever it is you're a fan of that you can't acknowledge its flaws and you can't acknowledge its faults. You think that it is the most perfect thing when nothing is perfect. Nothing is perfect. Nothing is beyond critique. Nothing is beyond criticism. And when you cannot intelligently evaluate what is reasonable assessments, what are intelligent critiques, what are actual constructive criticisms that do bear merit and that do have some type of legitimate weight, when you cannot evaluate those things in a fandom that you participate in, you are trading along the lines of fanboyism. To use an example of what I'm talking about, in my last video when I did my Legend of Korra episodes 11 and 12 reviews, a lot of people reacted negatively to my review because they thought most of them just racked it up to straight, oh, you're hating. Which, just so you all know, whenever someone makes the claim that, oh, you're just hating, that's because that person cannot validate or evaluate constructive criticism or a critique from just negative remarks. Like, they take anything that is negative and they just equate it all as hate, which that's not the case, because as I said, in regards to that review, for the most part, I did not have a problem with the series, but and I consider myself a fan of the series, but I can see when there are flaws in a series. I can see those flaws. I can make those criticisms. I can make those critiques. I can see that. The mark, and once again, like I said, I do not think this is treading along the lines of fanboyism with the elitist mentality that I mentioned earlier. But I always believe that the mark of a true fan is one that takes part in a fandom and can acknowledge flaws and faults and failures and shortcomings. But after evaluating those, can still say, okay, I have my pros, I have my cons. I still think my pros outweigh my cons, and I still like the product for what it is. That, in my opinion, is the mark of a true fan, and that, I think, once again, is what separates a normal fan from a fanboy. Because when you can't see those, you are treading along the lines of fanboyism. And like I said, I've done this myself. I mean, a couple of years ago, I was the banner waving New England Patriots fan, where I was like, oh, my team can't do no wrong. But I'll tell you, nowadays, I'll be the first one to acknowledge where it's like, yeah, man, they fucked up. Man, Tom, you shouldn't have threw that pass. Oh, Gronkowski, man, you should have came down with that. Oh, Ellis, what you doing, man? You got to duck. You got to cover up. You got to get those yards. I still love my team, but even I can acknowledge when they fuck up, and I'll be the first one to acknowledge, yeah, man, they fucked up. Just like with the, like in regards to the Super Bowl, Was I mad that they lost? Of course I was. But then again, I'm like, well, let's see. We didn't do this, we didn't do this, we didn't do this, we didn't do this. If we would have corrected some of these mistakes, we would have brought home the game. We'd have won the championship. I'll be the first one to acknowledge that. The same thing happened to me with when I mentioned I was a Sony fanboy, because back then I thought Sony could do no wrong. It's like, yeah, man, fuck Microsoft, fuck the Xbox, fuck Nintendo, fuck the Wii. Yeah, Sony, man, PlayStation 3, we're doing it. And then of course I bought a PlayStation 3 and I was hugely disappointed in the product. And that's when I had to take a step back and think, it's like, okay, wait a minute, maybe I got out of line with that. Maybe I said some things, or maybe I've done a few things that were unreasonable, that maybe I shouldn't have done. Which brings me to my third biggest problem Which brings me to my third biggest problem about fanboys is the unreasonable expectations that fanboys have. I think that's another huge problem that plays within the whole of fanboyism, is that fanboys many times they set these unreasonable standards, and whenever a product does not meet up with those unreasonable standards, then it's either it's these two extremes. It's either the blind loyalty, which ties into another problem of fanboyism, where once again they can't see they see no wrongs, they see no flaws. It's like, no, this isn't wrong because this product can do no wrong. That blind loyalty. Or it's the complete opposite. It's the blind dismissal. It's like, no, I won't accept this under any circumstance. It's horrible. It's not what I wanted. It's not what I envisioned it to be. No. With fanboyism, there's hardly ever any middle ground. Hardly ever. It's always these extremes. Because let's face it, when you're talking about a fandom, the fanboys are the extreme. And their behavior and their mentality suggests that. It's like Siths. They only deal in absolutes. So all those things I feel like are problems. And all those things transpire and they contribute to the giant problem that is fanboyism. Now, with the last couple of minutes I have left in this video, I want to talk about how all these things negatively affect a fandom. Number one, as I mentioned earlier, there's an alienation that occurs. Whether it's an alienation that occurs within the fandom, or it's an alienation that occurs with people who are trying to get into the fandom, those fanboys have a way of doing that. They completely alienate others, and they alienate themselves. So that's number one. Number two, they have a habit of tarnishing fandoms' reputations. I mean, let's face it, Trekkies and Star Wars fans are amongst some of the biggest fandoms, and they are some of the most notorious fandoms for fanboyism, because those fanboys have tarnished the reputation of that fandom in that way. But hang on a minute, consider this. I would hate to admit this, but the numbers speak for themselves. That fanboyism, technically speaking, is a necessary evil. And this is what I mean. Because, like I said, those fanboyisms, the fanboys, they are the ones, who, tarnish those reputations. But then again, it's kind of like that. It's kind of like that line in between famous and infamous, because the Star Wars franchise and Star Trek franchise are famous for their fan bases, but they are also infamous for their fanboys. But as I mentioned, it's somewhat of a necessary evil. Why? Because who are the ones who are buying all the products? The fanboys. Who are the ones that are going to all the conventions? The fanboys. Who are the ones that are always, in the movie theaters and always watching the shows, always buying the comics, always watching the cartoons, always buying the action figures, the collectibles, all that jazz? Who are the ones doing all the cosplays and stuff like that? More often than not, it's always the fanboys. They are major contributors to the fandom, and the fandom thrives because of that. But once again, this goes back to my original statement. Because the fanboys do that, that's good. That's a positive thing. But when it gets to the point where they start doing all the things that I mentioned earlier in this video, that's when the positive becomes the negative. That's when their positive effects, like all their positive effects, that's when the negatives start coming into play. And more often than not, the negatives seem to overshadow the positives. Because to outsiders, people outside the fandom looking in, they only see the negatives. And those negatives alienate them. They can't take part in it. So like I said, it's a necessary evil, but I think, once again, a solution to the problem is, first off, acknowledging these things. Like, anyone watching this video that acknowledges that they do some of these things, believe it or not, you have it within you to not do these things. And I mean, hell, it's not even anything about, oh, well, you know, I've done it already, so why do I have to keep continuing? No, that's a cop-out, dude. At any point in time, you can decide, hey, maybe I shouldn't be so quick to, you know, to judge people who are trying to get into the fandom. You know, like if to use Game of Thrones as an example, I've been loved and hated by the Song of Ice and Fire fan base, because on the one hand, I've been loved because I was a newcomer and they enjoy having a newcomer. But at the same time, when I start making criticisms about the product, all of a sudden I'm ostracized. I'm a leper. I'm a pariah because they don't deem me worthy to criticize the product. And like I said, the two sides of the coin, the positives and then the negatives. And oftentimes they are counterproductive. They are counterproductive. So anyone who watches this video who acknowledges these things in themselves, you can actually change that. And I mean, hey, you could argue, but hell, these fan bases are so big. What could I possibly do? Well, consider this. If you change your habits and you are actually able to get some of your friends into the fandom because you are no longer fanboying, you've already affected change. Hell, you've gotten someone else into the fandom because you weren't doing some of these things anymore. You see what I'm saying? You weren't alienating people anymore. You weren't thinking that they were below you because they didn't know what you knew. Hell, any of you guys who are like, hey man, I like this thing. I think you'll like it too. Guess what? I'm going to a convention. You want to come with? And you take a friend with, and they like, hey, I really like this. This is cool. Maybe I'll start picking you up. I mean, shit. That's change right there. It's possible. This is not outside the realm of possibility. Fanboyism is something that actually can be changed, and changed for the better. But the problem comes because what I'm talking about falls along the lines of self-improvement. And what you can't do is you can't force others to change. Like, you can't go to a group of fanboys and force them to change their ways, because it won't happen. If anything else, they'll continue doing what they're doing just to spite you. But for fanboys who might be watching this video, who might actually agree with what I'm saying, or at least think that I have a point, then if you decide on your own that, hey, maybe I shouldn't do that, that's how you fix the problem. And honestly, I think that's the best way, and that's the most reasonable way to fix the problem. You have to fix it within yourself first before you can fix it as a whole. Before you can fix it, you have to fix it introvertly before you can fix it extrovertly. So those are pretty much my thoughts on the thing. Like I said, hopefully this didn't, I realized this didn't come across a bunch as a rant, and I apologize for those of you all, because I said it was going to be a rant, and I apologize if it wasn't ranty enough. But I felt like discussing it in this manner was actually better than just, you know, fuck this, fuck that, fuck everybody else type bit. You see what I'm saying? And I hope that anyone who watched this video who might actually, you know, fall within the lines, like I said, this video is not targeted towards you, but this video is addressed to you because you are the fanboys who might be watching this. This video is actually intended for you. Like, I'm making this video for you because I'm speaking to you directly. Like I said, it's not about bashing you. I'm trying to help the situation. And like I said, I've done it myself. I've dealt with this myself, so hopefully people will see, well, if I've done it and I've managed to deal with it, then maybe they can too. That's all. That's all I'm trying to do. So with that being said, I'm gonna wrap up this video. I want to thank you all for joining. Thank you all for watching. I know this video is kind of long. Anyway, coming up later this weekend, I have my first ever video game review. My review of Pokemon Black. And then Sunday will be my anime favorites for July 2012, Cowboy Bebop. So I want to thank you all for joining me again this week. And in the comments below, let me know what you think. Let me know your thoughts. This has been Larry Williams, OAW Commander-in-Chief. I'm signing off. And until next time, peace.